It's way too early for it, but let's get bold.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Lars, first of all, we just passed 2,500 subscribers on YouTube. That's an awesome feat. Thank you to all the everydayers out there. Anybody who's listened to a single episode of Locked On Huskies and felt, especially if you felt the need to keep coming back and that you're an everydayer and you click subscribe and enjoy our content, that really does mean so much to us. So thank you to each and every one of you for doing that. We cannot wait to see what's next in store for the show. And speaking of what's in store, Lars, we love our bold predictions here on Locked On Huskies. And we decided to have a little bit of fun, and it's way too early, but we are each bringing 5 bold predictions to the table for the 2024 season. So I'm going to just hand it off to you here. What is your first bold prediction that is certainly way too early?
Oh, there's so many to go off of, but let's just start off on the offensive side. I am going to say, and I need to probably caveat this a little bit, and it's not necessarily truly bold, but I think Damon Williams is going to play more than 4 games this season.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm going to caveat saying that that's bold is because really he should only get 4. If you look at how the schedule plays out, and if Will Rogers does what we think he's supposed to do, I just think from what we saw from Damon, he's too good not to play more than 4 games. And I think you're going to start to see maybe in some of those Big Ten games where if Will Rogers isn't moving the ball by halftime, they might give Damon a couple reps in that second quarter and third quarter just to see, can you light up a spark? We saw that a number of times at other schools across the country where I think it was that's how Caleb Williams started his career at Oklahoma, if you think about it, where he comes in at second half, whatever, and ends up leading him to a massive comeback, and the rest is history. When you look at Will, this is not an indictment on Will, because I think Will's a fine passer. Obviously, what he did at Mississippi State and the SEC speaks for itself. But just Will Rogers, Damon Williams' dynamic ability there's no way he doesn't get more than 4 games. I don't necessarily think that this is not me saying he's going to start, but I do think that competition in spring and fall camp is going to be a lot closer than even we've indicated that it was in the spring. Most of that's going to depend on the offensive line, obviously. Yep. But just when we saw all the throws that he could make, was it great? No. But I don't recall him missing short. And to me, if you're going to start or play a true freshman at quarterback at any point in the Big Ten, the one thing he can't do is play scared. And Damon Williams is not going to play scared as a true freshman. So that'll be my first one, where Will Rogers is starting quarterback. But Damon Williams, I will say, gets at least 6 or 7 games as a true freshman.
So I certainly like where your head's at there. I'm going to push back a little bit, and it's mainly to do with the offensive line. Damon did not have his best showing in the spring game. We watched it. We truly do love his talent. We saw him excel in so many different ways throughout the spring, but it wasn't his best showing, and a lot of that was due to the offensive line, where there were so many struggles up there. And I'm really curious to see what it looks like this fall, and that's going to be the one thing that all hinges on for me. So you're absolutely right too. I can 100% see him doing that. But it really is going to depend on the offensive line, how comfortable I'm going to feel about that moving forward. So with that said, my first one, 3. I'm just going to say 3. This is going to be Washington's 3rd straight season with multiple 1,000-yard receivers. In 2022, it was Rome Odunze and Jalen McMillan. In 2023, it was Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk. In 2024, it will be Denzel Boston and Jeremiah Hunter. I truly don't know how bold this is. I know everybody who watched the spring game saw Denzel just do Denzel things like we have seen all spring. I think that Jeremiah Hunter can absolutely do similar things, but it's all going to come down to one thing, and it's going to be the same thing we just talked about, and it's the offensive line. But when I look at these two guys based on nothing but talent, it certainly seems feasible. Jedd Fisch's offense has shown that it can do that, and it did it in 2022. So I certainly think that it's possible for this to happen. The talent is there. Everything is there. Will Rogers knows how to get the ball into the hands of his playmakers. And he showed in the spring game that when he gets in a pinch, he's going to turn to Denzel Boston. And when he has both Denzel Boston and Jeremiah Hunter on the field, it's going to be really, really hard for a bunch of defenses to cover both of those guys. So that's where I'm going to go with my first one.
I like it. It's one of those where I certainly am with you that one of those two is going to be 1,000-yard receiver. And I think of the two, obviously, planted the flag for Denzel. And that's no slight to Jeremiah Hunter. I just see Jeremiah being that post up in the 20 yards and in touchdown range where once you get in the red zone, him, Quentin Moore, obviously Denzel, but those first two really offer a size mismatch in the red zone. So I can see him having multiple, double-digit touchdowns. But when you look at the Arizona offense in 23, Jacob Cowing didn't exactly get even north of 80 yards per game. So to me, the yards per game might not necessarily equate, but the touchdowns more importantly will equate.
So I agree with you there, but I'm gonna drop a stat bomb on you here. Jeremiah Hunter in 2022 had 60 catches for 965 yards and 5 touchdowns. In 2023, he had 62 catches for 703 yards and 7 touchdowns. He did that at Cal. Cal did not necessarily have the best quarterback play. And I think that with what Washington's offense can be, with what Will Rogers has shown that he can do between those things, and in some of these early games, we might see them throwing the ball over the yard. I think that there's a lot of opportunities for him to certainly set his career high in catches as well as touchdowns this season. But I just think that he's going to have a lot of opportunities in this offense, kind of like what we saw in 2022 with Rome Odunze and Jalen McMillan, where they got so many targets because they were just so consistently open. And I think that that's what this combination could end up looking like in the future. And I know that's bold, but that's the whole point of the show. So I'm going to stick with it. Lars, what's your second one?
Ooh, that's a good one. So probably we did 2 offensive, probably flip to the defensive side. This one's going to be bold. I think Jordan Shaw will be your interceptions leader in the secondary.
Okay.
Now that's no slight to Appreciation's price talk, because I think he could be a guy that leads the defense in PBUs and breakups and things like that. But I don't know necessarily if teams are going to end up testing Price Hawk as much as they're going to test Shaw. And from what we saw in the spring, Shaw's like a sawed-off shotgun, where he's just going to find a way and break to the ball and blow everyone away. And I mean that in the most respectful way possible.
That was an interesting comparison.
But when you think about it, where all those interceptions, he had multiple double-digit interception, or not double-digit, but multi-interception practices in the spring. And one of the things that really impressed me about his ability, his reaction and his instincts are second to none. And I know that's, maybe second to Appreciation's Price Hawk, but when you look at that secondary in that nickel slot, how many teams are going to want to test them over the middle, knowing you have, with this defensive scheme, the safety help over the top and outside cornerbacks, that middle area with Carson Bruner, Jordan Shaw, potentially, the Tristan Dunn, Husky nickel hybrid linebacker role will end up getting a lot more targets than I think people initially were going to think coming into the season. And so I think Jordan Shaw is going to have the most chances to get interceptions. That's no slight to Appreciation's Price Talk, but we got to go bold here. And so I don't think anybody would expect Jordan Shaw to lead the team in interceptions, but that's going to be my pick.
I like where you're going with there. I've got a defensive one, but we're going to hit a break first. And give a shout out to our good friends over at Gametime, because Gametime is now an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Price on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets tip off, which sounds awesome. Lars, as we record this, the Celtics and the Cavaliers about to tip off game 2, and I really wish that I was able to go to one of those games. I just miss going to playoff games so much. I really wish there was a basketball team in Seattle, because if they were in the playoffs, that I'd be using the Gametime app to get some great tickets, because they've got last minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. They've got zone deals where you can save even more when you choose a section and let Gametime choose the seats. And with their lowest price guarantee, Gametime will credit you with 110% of the difference. If you can find lower prices somewhere else, you can take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So, Lars, I've got a defensive one for you here. I like the Jordan Shaw pick. I think that's a really fun one. I had that one written down. So now I'm actually going to have to switch here on one of them. But another one that I have written down here is I have 3 players recording 5 or more sacks on this defense. And see, that's where it's bold. I don't have names. That was a little bit too bold for me. We're saying, all right, this guy. But I can certainly see 3 or more players getting 5+ sacks on this defense, mainly due to the scheme. I think that Steve Belichick is going to do a phenomenal job scheming some of these guys to get pressures, whether it be Lance Holtzclaw, Zach Durfee, Isaiah Ward, Sebastian Valdez, Javon Parker. There's a lot of talent. I still think that one more piece needs to be added at defensive tackle. I'm really curious to see who that might be, what kind of role they might play. I think Logan Sagapolu might be a little bit interesting there in his first year defensive tackle, where just in terms of the position they might want to play, just kind of be a true run stuffing nose kind of player. But if you can get another guy where it's certainly not going to have a production background like Sebastian Valdez does, but if you can get another player who can just rush the passer in spurts and kind of just keep offensive lines on their toes, you can do a whole lot of things. I don't want to forget Voight Newfie in this discussion either, where he's a guy who, no matter where he's lined up, no matter what he's doing, he's found a way to get pressure. So I think that's one that I want to have some fun with and give you, say, 3 guys, 5+ sacks, and I want to give a lot of credit to Steve Belichick's scheme when I do that.
I like that. This is a 5+1. If I'm picking your 3 guys, I'll pick the 3 guys for you. It's Zach Durfee, obviously. It's Voight Newfie. I'm glad you mentioned him because his versatility is going to be why he gets 5, because I think there's going to be a couple halves in there. But the other one, and this is kind of a toss-up. It's either going to be one of Isaiah Ward or Lance Holtzclaw. Somebody else on the other side of that. And now Lance, they're 2 different types of players. They are similar in a way, but there's a little more versatility, I think, in Isaiah Ward, where we saw him line up at the spring, somewhat outside, somewhat on the edge, kind of all over. Whereas Holtzclaw is that, it's not that he's a one-trick pony, but he is just that put me in a cannon and shoot me and let me just chase after the quarterback. His notable one shot, one kill tweet from his first career sack kind of symbolizes that, where he's not a guy that's going to necessarily wow you with size, but wow you with quickness and instincts. And so there's plenty of potential for sacks on this defense. And I'm glad you went with that route. I will stay on the defensive side. This one isn't necessarily bold, but let me, before I say this, I think you know where I'm going because it's going to be an overall tackles stat. But one for me, I'm going to say Carson Bruner has over 120 tackles to lead.
Okay. I like that.
Now, and the reason why I had to say I had to give a higher number because Dom Hampton led the team with 109 last season.
Correct. Yeah.
And so just for comparison's sake, just to throw some numbers out there, but Carson's an all-around linebacker. He's a guy where we've seen him come up, make plays in the run game, make plays over the middle in the pass game. Really a guy that can do it all and truly does seem to be kind of the heartbeat of this defense where everything is built center out. You still have the outside corners in Prysock and Jackson. You have the safety help over the top, but everything starts with Carson. And he should have been a starter last season if not for Eddie coming back for his 6th season. So Carson is a guy to me that is going to lead this defense, probably even have 3 or 4 sacks, certainly some tackles for loss. But give me 120 total tackles for Carson Bruner.
I like that one. So I'm actually going to, that's a perfect one. I don't think that one needs any further explanation right there. So I'm going to flip back over to the offensive side here for my next one. And I think you're going to like this one. Jonah Coleman, 10+ total touchdowns. I've been so impressed with him throughout the spring. I think that he's somebody who, with his size, just with what we've seen him be able to do, not just around the goal line, but in open space, just somebody who's as physical and as talented as he is, not just in terms of, because I said 10 total. I didn't say they were all going to be rushing, even though I certainly believe he can do that. I'm just really excited about watching him in a Jedd Fisch offense on the team that we actually cover, because watching him at Arizona was really, really cool. But seeing that now all at Washington, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. He's shown to be a really cool guy with a lot of personality, and he's somebody who you just can't help but root for the more you talk to him, the more you get to know him. So I really want to see him succeed in this offense. And I think when combined with Cameron Davis, I think we're going to see a lot of fun sets with the both of them on the field and just a 21 personnel kind of thing. I think that would be really cool. So just the more I think about it, the more I want to see Jonah Coleman. And I feel like 10 plus touchdowns is bold enough. And after what he did last season, I feel like it also might not be far enough.
I was going to say that when you said Jonah Coleman, I'm like, okay, I know where this is probably going, but I was surprised to learn that he only had.
Yeah, it's not high from last season, the touchdowns.
And so that to me is what makes it bold, because he doesn't come it almost in a way like Dylan Johnson, where Dylan Johnson didn't have a 1,000-yard season before last year. Jonah Coleman hasn't had it. And it just seems like that running back that emerges at Washington. I'm glad you mentioned Cam Davis, because I do think he's going to end up being a solid number 2. The curious thing for me is going to be when it comes down to, the 10-5-yard line and Washington decides to run the ball for a touchdown, which one of those guys is going to get the majority of those touchdowns, and how much rotation do you have between those two to split those reps? Because when you look at what he did there, what Coleman did at Arizona, he only had 1 receiving touchdown last year to go along with 5 rushing. Obviously, I think with the way this offense works, and if Will Rogers is your starting quarterback, the amount of wheel routes to Jonah Coleman are going to be off the chart. So he might just get 3 wheel route touchdowns just right there. So that's why I like that pick, because I do think we're going to see a little slightly different version of Jonah Coleman than what we saw at Arizona, which isn't a slight. I think it's a compliment to him, if anything, because he's going to be asked to do some different things, and we'll still see Adam Muhammad for a couple games. We'll still see some other backups and things like that. But to me, Jonah Coleman is going to be kind of the linchpin of the offense in terms of if the passing game for whatever reason gets stifled at any point, that running game has to deliver in a variety of ways. And so Jonah Coleman is capable of doing that. We just obviously haven't seen it in purple and gold. So let me kind of continue.
Sorry, I got one more thing I wanted to add to that, and I I want to back up the bold claim with it. Where do you remember how many touchdowns Cameron Davis scored in 2022?
10 or 11?
13. He had 13 touchdowns in 2022, all rushing, and he was the guy that Kalen DeBoer and that staff wanted to utilize close to the goal line when they had that timeshare between him and Wayne Talapapa. So on top of that, that was another thing that I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned, because Cam Davis is a perfectly capable goal line back. I think he's very, very good in those scenarios. We saw it on multiple occasions when he scored 3 touchdowns against Arizona State. We saw it just throughout the season that he was the guy that they turned to inside the 5-yard line. And I feel that we're going to see some real creativity from Jedd Fisch and Brendan Carroll when you get down inside the goal line. We've already seen some of it during spring practice with some particular routes, but those were more passing plays than they were running plays, where they just didn't feel like they wanted to line up and get anybody hurt, just not even take that risk. So I think that as we get into the fall, we might see a little bit more work from Cam Davis around the goal line, but I'm going to stick with Jonah Coleman, 10 plus touchdowns there. Lars, I'm sorry, I cut you off. Please feel free.
No, you were good, but that's also why I kind of mentioned the dynamic of Cam Davis, because somebody's going to get those touchdowns, and I would imagine they'll probably split them up, and Cam Davis might get more of them, but that could also – you could have a 2-back system where you line up Jonah Coleman on one side of Will Rogers and Cam Davis on the other, and say at the 15-yard line, Jonah Coleman goes out for a swing, Cam Davis has a fake read, and one of those two is going to be open. So that's how you maximize the offense. So I have no problem with that pick. The other one, so now I got 4, right?
You're on your 4th right here, yeah.
Ooh, okay. So now we got to start to get a little creative here. I am going to say, I don't know how much Decker DeGraff leads your tight ends in touchdowns with 3.
That's bold.
3 or 4.
That's bold. I like that.
Where
okay.
I think
expand.
I'm not, because when we saw plenty of what Quentin Moore could do, but I do think, as we mentioned on the show, he's going to have enough passing opportunities in split out combinations and not necessarily have to be an inline guy. But I just think we saw too much from him and with Khaliki Lotzi coming off the knee injury or ankle injury last season, Decker is going to certainly have the opportunity to come into fall camp and say, hey, Khaliki is your second blocker. Just throw me outside and let me see what happens. And I think, especially in those first couple of weeks, and then, side note, Decker DeGraff will have a touchdown within the month of September.
Okay. I like the specificity there. So I've got a lot of thoughts here, but I want to ask you this question. Does this mean that we're going to see 3 tight end sets? Because I don't know how much of that I think this offense is going to just hold.
I'm glad you asked. So I don't think it's going to be a 3 tight ends. I think it's going to be how they use Decker. It's going to be those certain packages where we're talking about when you're inside the opponent's 30 or 40 yard line, especially in the month of September against Weber State, Eastern Michigan, Wazoo, things like that. And even some of the other, Northwestern, some of the other lower Big Ten games where you could see Decker's versatility come into play, especially in certain parts on the field. Whereas Quentin Moore is obviously the guy that is the easier target of the two. But when you look, and then Kaliki obviously has the size, but he doesn't have the reps in the system. And I think with Decker getting those reps in spring, he showed the coaches enough to say, hey, yeah, I'm not anywhere near where Quentin and these guys are, but you could use me enough to where I could actually make a significant impact as a freshman, knowing that you have so many weapons outside. I don't know necessarily what the end result is going to be for the tight ends, but I do think there's going to be versatility. So I think it's going to be 2 tight end sets. Just how are you using those 2 tight ends with Decker possibly being lined up outside?
I strongly disagree with this, but we're going to take a break first. And we're going to give a shout out to our good friends over at Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there is just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get, like unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. You can get cool new playing pieces to travel the board with, and hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like Digging for Treasure or Robot Pachinko Machine, and there's always new time tournaments that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Lars, like I said, I disagree with this one. If I were to pick somebody, I'm going to go with Kaliki Latu here. I think that his size is such a valuable asset in the red zone. And our good buddy, friend of the show, Ben Glassmeyer, did a wonderful review of Kaliki Latu's film that he posted over on Huskies Wire. If you haven't read that yet, you need to go check it out. He truly did a wonderful job with that. And one of the first things that he talked about is that Kaliki Latu, one of his biggest areas of improvement is physicality at the catch point. And that's something that he needs to do. And I think that Jordan Paopao is going to work with him on that just as much as he possibly can, because we watch what Tanner McLaughlin did in Arizona's offense. I don't think that it's going to be that where Tanner McLaughlin led the Pac-12 in receiving yards for tight ends. It's not going to be that, but I think Kaliki Latu has 5 touchdown potential this season, 5+ touchdowns. This is my bonus one, since you gave us a bonus one, where I think he has 5+ touchdown potential here. And I think it has everything to do with his size, where if you can find a way to just split that guy out wide and teach him, all right, this is how you box somebody out. This is how you use your 6'7", 240 frame and just go up over the top of people. You can be a huge threat for us down here in the red zone. And he's somebody who can line up in line, can do a little bit of blocking for you. But if you split him out like that, that's just an ultimate threat to have. And we've seen how much that, especially just over the course of spring practice, that Jedd Fisch and Brendan Carroll like giving fade balls to Denzel Boston, Jeremiah Hunter. You want a supersized version of one of those guys? Here's Kaliki Latu for you. I think that's just kind of what my thought process is there. And I feel that if Jordan Paopao can coach him up, which we know he can because he's put a whole bunch of guys in the NFL over his career as a tight ends coach, and he can certainly do that with Kaliki Latu as well. So moving on to my fourth one. I've got an interceptions one here. I don't think he ends up leading the team here, but I've got Justin Harrington with 3+ interceptions this season. I wanted to make sure that I shouted him out because the more I watch this guy's film from when he's healthy, the more I like what I see. And he's a really great depth add at the safety position. I know we've talked about how he's a really great mentor for some of the younger guys in the room, and that he's just a really great locker room guy to have around. But he's also an awesome athlete who can do a whole bunch of different things for you on the football field as long as he's healthy. I think that he can play up top. I think he can come down to the box. I think he can play man coverage. He can do a whole bunch of different things. And I think he's going to get tested early on in the year. And I think that he's going to have a couple of interceptions where I'm a big fan of this guy's film, of everything I've seen from him so far. And I think he's just truly going to have a bigger role in the defense than some might expect him to right now. But I want to get really bold with it and say 3+ interceptions for him this year.
I like that. And the key caveat there is, can he stay healthy, right? Because we saw that at Oklahoma, where he starts the first few games, has a great impact, and then is out for the rest of the season. So if he can stay healthy, I think he's certainly going to be right up there with Carson and Ephesians Brysock and Cam Piculon as some of the leaders on this defense. It's that same thing with the offensive line, right? Where until we see it, I can't fully commit to. You're not wrong. I absolutely love the take. I love the pick and everything. But from that standpoint, that's on the high end. Now, what the expectations would be, probably just play a season. Just can you just get through the season? But if we're into mid-October and he's clicking on all cylinders, then yeah, absolutely, I would not be surprised to see him have a significant impact on the team, because that's really what this defense is going to dictate. Where you need to have guys across the board. It can't just be Carson Bruner. It can't just be Ephesians Brysock and Cam Piculon. It's going to take a group effort for this defensive scheme to work. And that's why you have so many different moving pieces. So that brings me to my fifth. So this is going to be a big one. Since this is going to be my fifth one, we'll save this one. We'll bookmark it. We'll come back to it in July or August. The over-under for Washington is 7.5 wins.
Yep.
I am going to go over. And the reason why I say that is because I'm expecting the offensive line to show up. Now, if the offensive line doesn't show up, you're looking at 7. I do not think it's going to be less than 7. And to be clear, this is end of regular season. This is not including a bowl game. So I can see them finishing 8-4, 9-4 with a bowl win, 7-5, 8-5 with a bowl game. That would be your worst case scenario. But I think as long as this offensive line can it doesn't even have to be anywhere near what the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line looked like last year. It just has to be good enough to give Will Rogers or to my first point, Damon Williams, just 3 seconds. That's all you really got to do. Give him 3 seconds, because in that time, somebody in this offense is going to be open. And the other side of that coin is also, in order to get Jonah Coleman and Cam Davis in the run game going, you have to be able to run block too. So it all comes down to the offensive line. And I'm not saying anything, there's no breaking news here with this one, but I do think that this team does have 8-9 win potential at its peak. I think more so 8. And so if the over under is 7.5, give me 8.
I like that. That's a good one. I know that's something that, we've seen a lot of everydayers saying, oh, that's a little too optimistic. I mean, we get it. We do. But it's something where we're projecting out. And, if somebody like D'Angelo Tutiale comes in and does well, if Enoch Vimahai can get some nice coaching from Brennan Carroll, that could be huge. Getting guard Memolar back is something that I'm going to continue harping on, because that's something that I really do think is going to help. And then it's just a matter of figuring out left tackle. Figuring out left tackle is really, really important. And it could be the crux of all of this. It really could be. But until we see what that looks like, until we know the roster is finalized, I'm totally okay with that. Which brings me to my final one. And you want to talk about getting bold? I've got a bold one for you. Washington is going to return a kickoff for a touchdown this year. And I mean that in 2 ways. I mean, Washington is going to return a kickoff for a touchdown this year. And I mean, it's going to come from true freshman Jordan Washington. I am enamored with this guy's film, man. I think it's so much fun to watch. I really am having a lot of fun watching him. Shout out to Ben Glassmeyer again, because, he does fantastic work, and he did he's going to be doing a film review of Jordan Washington very soon. But one of the things that we talked about is just how quickly this guy gets up to top speed. Boom, it's done. It's that quick. It's 2 steps and he's already out the door 40 yards down the block. Like that's how quick this guy moves. And it is so much fun to watch. I love it so much. And if he comes in this fall, he's got 10 extra pounds on him. I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of the guys that ends up burning his red shirt, which I know that's doubly bold, but mainly because he has so much potential as a return man. I think he's got great potential as a running back too, and just in the offense as a whole, but there are a lot of guys in front of him. So I don't want to go too far out on a limb there yet. But when I look at what he can do as a kick returner on special teams, thanks to his elite speed, I want to get really bold, and I would say he's going to return a kickoff for a touchdown this year.
I like that. And I'm glad you didn't pick exactly when it's going to happen, because I could honestly see him having close to multiple touchdowns. I think he's going to have a couple as long as he's there. Well, when I said, I mean, he has that game breaking speed to get those 40, 50, 60-yard returns where, okay, it's not a touchdown, but 3 plays later, we're talking about Will Rogers to Jeremiah Hunter or Denzel Boston for a 20, 30-yard touchdown. Those drives become automatically shorter with a great return. So even though Jordan Washington doesn't take it to the house, it's a house call 2 plays later because he set the offense up. So that's what I mean by he could have a couple. He'll probably end up, I agree, having one. But I could certainly see him just having, he's really going to be, I don't want to say that, because again, not as a true freshman, but he has just with the vision and the speed that he has, he could really do some damage to Dante Pettis' return records over the course of his Washington career. Over the course of his Washington career, not as a true freshman. Just be very clear about this. But when you think about what he could be as a sophomore and then as a junior, by his junior season, I mean, Dante didn't have the speed, but he had the vision. Yeah. Jordan Washington's got the vision, kind of, as a freshman, but he's got the speed. If you can pair those two together over the next 18 to 24 months, I love Dante Pettis. I love me some Dante Pettis. Big fan. Always been a big fan. But his return records might be in danger in a couple of years.
That is the perfect full prediction to end the show on. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. Truly, like we said at the beginning of the show, it means so much to us. We can't thank you enough for everything it is that you do for us, and we just truly appreciate all of it. And if you enjoy the content, please feel free to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere, updating the channel to do content every single day. Please feel free to leave a like on the video. Click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video, because we're doing that, like I said, every morning. You got any questions, comments, concerns, show ideas, anything like that, drop them down in the comments below. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it all really does help us out. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will talk to you on Monday.